Welcome to Sydney, the spectacular backdrop for the finale of the 2014 Extreme Sailing Series, which has been one of the most competitive and exciting to date.
They are absolutely gunning it. JP Morgan completely in control.
Over 11 months of global touring, Olympic medalists, America's Cup winners, around the world legends went head-to-head in one of the toughest events in professional sailing. But here, this is a level playing field.
Oh, there's a massive crash!
Expectations were huge, with new teams joining the established lineup going all out to topple the old order. And adding to the hype and the subplots, the 2012 and 2013 champions, the Wave Muscat, were out to make it 3 in a row. But their arch rivals, Alinghi, focused on losing their runner-up tag and take the series win. The series kicked off in Singapore back in February. The compact stadium, bang in the middle of one of the most dynamic cities in Asia, was the perfect venue to start the 2014 series. The race course, with a shifty, tricky wind, ensured that racing was full on from the word go.
They're Alinghi way up on their head, near capsize!
And there were plenty of bumps and scrapes.
Big issue, big
My goodness, there's a mast come down! Oh my goodness! I have never seen anything like this in my life.
But in the end, it was Alinghi and Morgan Larsen who got out of the blocks first and took the win. The 2013 series champions, the Wave Muscat, were second, but it's advantage Alinghi.
Morgan Larsen, the king of Singapore, 2 years in a row.
Next up on the series, it was Oman. It was home waters for Lee McMillan and the Wave Muscat, perhaps under pressure to get the win and kickstart their season. The winds were light over the first few days, which proved to be a real leveller amongst the fleet. But then, the Arabian Peninsula saved the best till last, as the wind finally blasted across the track on the last day. In the final race of the event, 4 teams were in the running to take the win. But when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Lee McMillan and the Wave nailed it on the last race to take the win.
The Wave Muscat win the final race and win the event in Muscat.
The disappointment of coming so close yet so far for some of the teams was there for all to see. After Act 2, it's as tight as you like at the top of the series leaderboard. The 2014 Extreme Sailing Series then headed to China, presented by Land Rover. Qingdao has a notorious reputation in sailing as a track that bites. Over the first few days, it was Real Team who began to mix things up. The Wave Muscat was struggling, but by the final afternoon of racing, Alinghi were just about in control. And then, the Qingdao track bit.
Red Bull go for a big bear away. There's a huge crash on board.
Despite being out of the final few races, Alinghi had done enough for the win and took Act 3. But tellingly, the Wave failed to make the podium for the first time in over a year. The historic city of St. Petersburg on the River Neva was the spectacular venue for Act 4, a new fixture on the global tour. Again, it all came down to the last race. This time, a 5-way shootout for the win. And it was Alinghi who came out on top. They extended their advantage at the top of the all-important leaderboard, but the battle for the podium behind the top 2 was hotting up. Over 90,000 flocked to the event in Cardiff to watch the best of the best slug it out on Welsh waters. They were not disappointed.
Tack! Don't tack! Don't tack!
A collision on the final race between the top 3, Alinghi, the Wave Muscat, and JP Morgan BAR, heightened the intensity of the battle for the win.
There is penalties flying all over the place. I've never seen anything like this.
Lee McMillan just about took it. Celebrations are happening on board. He is pretty pleased with that. Alinghi snatched second, and Ben Ainsley got his team on the podium for the first time. So was the pendulum now swinging back towards the 2013 champions. In some of the best sailing conditions on the series thus far, Istanbul and Act 6 was a classic, but there was a change in the air. The racing was fast and furious, and fortune swung one way and then the other. This time, Dean Barker's Emirates Team New Zealand crossed the line in first and won the act. But behind them, tactics and rivalries were in full swing. Alinghi sailed their big rivals, the Wave Muscat, down the field to protect their position at the top of the series leaderboard.
Morgan Larson is slowing his boat on purpose to put maximum pain on the Wave Muscat.
Confirmation, if it was needed, was that Morgan Larson was focused on the bigger prize. But in Istanbul, the dominance of the established two old protagonists had finally been broken. The penultimate act of the season, Act 7 in Nice, proved to be a defining act of the series. The Swiss teams of Alinghi and Real Team slugged it out for the win in France from day one. Could there be another different winner on the French podium? But Morgan Larson pulled something special out of the bag just when it was needed in the final race to take the win and the act. Real Team finished second, and the Brits, JP Morgan BAR, came third, getting their second podium finish of the series. The Wave Muscat never really got going, and crucially had their worst act to date. So Alinghi, after 7 acts, have one hand on the trophy. Battles rage behind them for the podium, but what twists and turns would the final act in Sydney conjure up? Sydney, Australia. The famous Opera House and the Sydney Harbour Bridge provided the stunning backdrop to the final act of the series. The wind put pay to racing on day 1, but on day 2 it kicked in to ensure the racing was fast and furious. The Wave Muscat fought to the bitter end to try and retain their title, but Morgan Larson and Alinghi always had one hand firmly on the trophy. Alinghi taking the Wave Muscat all the way out to the far top side of the course. GAC Pindar tried to steal the headlines on the final day with a capsize, but the day belonged to the Swiss. But I can tell you that Morgan Larson crossing the finish line does mean that he is Act 8 champion and also the 2014 Extreme Sailing Series champion. Real Team clinched a 3rd place finish on the Sydney podium and 3rd on the series podium. The Wave Muscat finished a brave 2nd and runner-up in the series. But this was always about Alinghi. Morgan Larson and his crew wrapped it up in emphatic style. They took the act win in Sydney, but more importantly, they took the series win. This epic global series continues to thrill and excite. And after all the hype and expectation, 2014 will go down as a vintage year.